finance.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Financial Independence Podcast, the podcast that gets inside the brains of some of the best and brightest in the personal finance space to find out their strategies and tactics for pursuing financial independence. On today's show, we have Brad and Alexi from TravelMiles101.com, and they're here to talk about, travel hacking and how to use miles and points to pretty much travel for nearly free. This is definitely a subject that's really close to my heart because we do a ton of traveling, and it really is not a big part of our budget at all, just because we've been able to utilize miles and points and all the other tips and tricks that are talked about so much in the travel hacking space. Brad and Alexi are actually both in the early retirement financial independence space as well. Brad's site, richmondsavers.com, and Alexi's milesdividendmd.com. Both dive into lots of financial topics that are related to financial independence. So I'm excited to have them both on the show because we can not only dive into the cool stuff they're doing over at Travel Miles 101 in the travel hacking space, but I also really want to chat with them about a few things in the financial space as well. So without further delay, Brad and Alexi, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks
We're
for
super
having
excited
us,
to be here. Sorry, talking over each other.
Yeah, I know I'll do better to address each of you individually, so you don't have to worry about that. But I'm excited to have you guys on, and obviously we're going to chat a lot about travel hacking. But before I do, you guys are both in the financial independence, early retirement space as well. So it'd be good to get some of your background before Travel Miles 101 started, and just talk about how you got on the path to financial independence, and talk a little bit about your other sites. So, Brad, do you want to kick off?
Sure. Sounds good, Brendan. Well, yeah, again, thanks for having us. This is great. I've been a mad fientists fan for quite some time, so it's cool to be on the podcast.
Nice, thanks.
And yeah, so my personal finance site is richmondsavers.com. So I actually live in Richmond, Virginia, and I just, kind of started this as a little side project, just kind of like a passion project. And, obviously I wouldn't have named it Richmond Savers if I thought it was going to be some huge site probably. But, just kind of getting my financial thoughts on paper or digital paper as it may be. And, I had been, I've always been frugal. I've always been interested in early retirement, and probably even before I thought about it on that concrete of a level. It's always just been something that's, part of my life. So, I just, started this site. And then I guess what kind of got us some notoriety or acclaim, let's say, was this trip to Disney World that we had put together using rewards miles. So this is how it all kind of ties into travel hacking and travel miles and such. And we wound up getting mentioned in the New York Times and on NBC and CBS for this essentially free trip that we put together for my family of four to head down to Disney World. It just kind of resonates with people. So that was really the beginning of the shift from just kind of a generic personal finance blog into a travel rewards coaching service, which is what I pretty much started. So I'd help people one-on-one just get started with travel miles. It's a pretty confusing concept, as I'm sure you guys we've all spent probably hundreds of hours each studying this, and
absolutely.
Right. I mean, there's so many rules and so many details, and, regular people don't have time for that kind of nonsense. And, if I could help cut through it with a 20-minute phone call or an email or something, then, that's a job well done. So it felt nice. It was very psychologically satisfying to help people. So, that's kind of the arc from Richmond Savers, the personal finance blog, to how I got into really helping people with travel rewards.
Nice. Yeah. And when you were saying that about you wouldn't have named it Richmond Savers if you thought it was going to be big, I was just thinking back to all your TV appearances and things that happened because of the Disney trip post. And it didn't matter too much that you were, your name is focused on Richmond when you were on such big news outlets and everything. So, we're going to dive definitely into a lot of the travel hacking stuff. But you're also a CPA, right? You in your in your day job prior to doing these things full time, you were a CPA.
Yep, that's right. Yeah,
so
I was
finance has
CPA
been something that's been in your blood for a while.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was in corporate tax for really my whole career after graduating college, and I actually just left my job earlier this year. So moving certainly closer towards financial independence and early retirement and that kind of stuff. So it's been a real interesting ride. I never could have imagined, when I started this website 2.5 years ago that I would be able to quit my job. And, obviously much of that is due to, disciplined saving over the years. I mean, it's not, this new business or anything like that, but it's definitely a neat thing.
That's amazing. Yeah. So you're not fully financially independent, but you used your savings to be able to cut ties with your other job and take entrepreneurship seriously, which is an amazing thing, because I think that's what a lot of people are. Maybe they do have ideas, or even maybe fledgling businesses that are just trapped in the get a paycheck, spend the paycheck cycle,
right.
And they can't even think about maybe doing something riskier but potentially more rewarding. But it sounds like you did exactly that, and your savings towards financial independence helped make that possible. Is that a
that's a great way to summarize it, Brendan, for sure. It's so much easier psychologically knowing that we live so far below our means, if you will, if that even means anything, but we're frugal. We don't frivolously waste money, and so our expenses are low. I mean, that makes it easier in and of itself. And then sure, we've been like I said, saving so diligently for so many years that it just makes it dramatically easier to take a risk, because the risk is minimized, right? I mean, there's essentially no risk, just because the monthly expenses aren't that much. So I totally agree. It definitely ties into it for sure.
That's excellent. And Alexi, so you're a doctor by trade, is that correct?
I am. I'm a cardiologist, actually an electrophysiologist, which is a specialty within cardiology that specializes in arrhythmia. So that's my day job.
Nice. And so how did Miles Dividend MD come about?
So, I had kind of an interesting route. It's almost the exact mirror of what Brad described. I actually came to early retirement theory from travel hacking. And my impetus for travel hacking is just kind of born out of my personal situation, which is that my wife is Japanese. And when we first got married, I just told myself, this woman is moving to America to marry me. It's an absolute priority that we get back to Japan every year, and no matter what, that's something that we're going to do. And we did. And I think when I was first in med school and she moved out to New Orleans, where I was going to med school, it was when oil was very, very cheap, and you can get like a round trip to Japan for like $400 from New Orleans, just crazy. But times changed and oil got more expensive, and our family grew. And at some point, now we're not getting 1 or 2 tickets to Japan. We're getting 5 tickets for my wife and me and our 3 kids. And so we were looking at, $6-7 grand just in airline fees to go over there. And, I make a very good salary, but no matter what, 6 or 7 grand out of pocket expenses gets your attention. And so when I booked that trip a few years ago for, I think it was like almost $7,000, I thought, there's got to be a better way of doing this. And started diving into Flyer Talk and all of the blogs, and just became totally entranced with this idea of getting value by just thinking a little bit outside the box. And just got pretty passionate about it, as I tend to do. And somehow I came across Mr. Money Mustache. And I think the first post I ever saw of him was when he was talking about his issues with affiliate links and how he had to give up his Chase income because they wanted him to take something about badassity off of the banner of his site. But somehow I got to his surprisingly simple math post about the 4% withdrawal rule, and that just really struck and just a chord with me almost immediately. And I kind of immediately saw that these two areas were very, very similar. It's something that's very obvious and right in front of you, and it's an opportunity that everyone can take advantage of, but it just requires thinking a little bit differently about the way to live or the way to plan your travel. And so I started getting very into that. And I think that was actually bolstered by my life experience, because becoming a doctor is kind of not a traditional career path. You don't start out at an entry-level job and then you get some raises and move up the corporate ladder and your lifestyle kind of gradually inflates. What happens is that you make a very modest living. For me, after med school, I had 7 years of training and started out making $30-something thousand a year. By the end, I was probably making $50-something thousand a year. And then you go out into practice, and all of a sudden your salary triples or quadruples, and so you get this just amazing increase in the amount of money you're bringing home. And it really taught me a lot of lessons, at least. So if you want to really understand lifestyle inflation, then go from making $60,000 a year to making $275,000 a year, and realizing that there's not that much more money in your bank account at the end of the month, and you're not materially more happy. So I kind of had the chance, before I ever even thought about early retirement or freedom or things like that, to experience the limits of what purchasing can buy you in terms of happiness. So that was a very important lesson that I had learned before I even thought about early retirement. And then, from there, the calculus was simple. To me, it just meant that every purchase I made had to buy me material more happiness than saving it and investing in my freedom could be. And it really had nothing to do with stopping working. I trained for so long to become a doctor that, I want to practice for at least 15 years before I think about cutting back, because I get a lot of value out of being a doctor. But it was more from the idea of buying my own freedom and getting to the point where, I'm going to work, and maybe some days I don't want to go to work, but I go to work anyway, but I'm doing it because of my own volition, because this has meaning for me. This is not because I don't have another choice. And that's the goal for me, more than not working.
Yeah, that's a very powerful thing, and it just completely changes your entire outlook and feeling towards work. And that's something I don't think I really expected, but it's been one of the best benefits is, when you're not forced to, you enjoy it more. At least I'm not as stressed out. I'm sure your job's a lot more stressful than typing some code into a computer. So
it is stressful, but at the same time, just living so far below my own means and realizing that, I already have everything that I could possibly need, and then some, means that, I just have this kind of wiggle space. I mean, I don't know that I would call it FU money, but I just have this big buffer between me and worrying about me or my family's survival. So I tend to be much more optimistic and sunny than I was before I started pursuing this. And I'd say I tend to be happier. It's not like I'm giving up my time now for some time in the future. I'm actually, my time now is better than it would have been if I weren't pursuing this.
That's great. So how long were you on the lifestyle inflation route before you realized that you weren't any happier, even though you were spending potentially 4 times the amount that you were just a few short years ago?
I would say about 3 years. So I'd say about 3 years out of practice, and a lot of it is actually just the changes that happen. You go out, you make a big purchase. I had to raise a bunch of money for a down payment. So some of it's already saving, right? I mean, but your expenses go through the roof. So there's a lot of it that's not, it's not like, I didn't go out and buy a Porsche or anything like that. But your spending just naturally expands to fill your salary. And then I reached kind of a point where, I had paid off a loan from a family member for my down payment, and my cars were paid off. And so I actually was having more money coming in. And it gave me this kind of natural area to say, okay, all this money goes into figuring out the best way to leverage it for freedom. And so I'd say about 3 years was right about when all these changes occurred.
And did you stumble upon Mr. My Mustache before you started making these, changes, or was it stumbling upon his, his simple math for early retirement that it sort of, flicked the light switch in your head?
I would say I was primed by the travel hacking thing. So I kind
Oh,
of
okay.
I kind of realized that there are ways of not spending money, that money doesn't buy happiness, that you can get more pleasure out of your life by taking a different approach. And then when I saw that post, it kind of crystallized it for me. And then that's the point at which I said, I realized, there's a very specific number that's going to be my number. And at that point, I will consider myself financially independent. And at that point, I'm not going to do anything for money. I'll do it for other reasons and other values. So it gave me just like a very concrete goal and made it much easier just to commit to. I find it very difficult to commit to saving when you have no sense of when you will have saved enough, or no sense of incremental growth towards a goal. So that was very helpful. I think that's a very, very well written post, and it really kind of simplifies really a simple equation. I mean, it really lets you see that there's a certain amount of money you need to live on, and there's a certain amount you need to save. And once you reach there, then you're making a probabilistic choice at that point to consider yourself financially independent.
Yeah, excellent. Definitely, I'll link to that and the badassity chase post from Mr. Money Mustache in the show notes, because they're both excellent posts to read. Brad, how did you stumble on the idea of early retirement? Did you see anyone doing it in your CPA days, or?
No, that's a great question, Brendan. I think so early retirement would have come about by reading Mr. Money Mustache as well, and frankly, reading your site. I think it has always been in my mind to save a significant amount and to live far below my means, but I'm not sure that there was ever any concrete nature to it. So I think it was I've been like that since I graduated college. I mean, I recollect moving back in with my parents and literally saving, I think, essentially every dollar that I earned. I mean, it was something crazy, like 70 or 80% of my income to save up for a down payment on this. So we lived on Long Island, so I bought like a co-op apartment, and that was within 2 years of graduating college, and it just kind of all rolled from there. So I mean, I've never been a spender. I've never been someone who is interested in cars or material goods by any means. It's so yeah, I mean, I can't say there was one like light switch moment,
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, actually seeing it on paper, seeing my favorite article as well is Shockingly Simple Math, at Mr. Money Mustache, followed by, I think it's from Middle Class to Kick Ass. That's another great article you should link to. Those are the two that I send to everyone. I just think it's the theory, and then it's the practice of how you can kind of live. And my wife, I'm really fortunate. My wife Laura is probably even more frugal than I am.
Nice.
And so yeah, it's been great. It's never been an issue with us. It's almost we look at it as a game in a sense, and basically living this middle class life just a little bit smarter. So from all outward appearances, we live a nice, upper middle class life. Nobody knows we're not the same people with, debt up to their eyeballs like everybody else. And, it's just a couple tweaks. And, I guess maybe it sounds easy to say it's a couple tweaks, but, for most people, they can start somewhere, right? They can do a couple things and let those compound on each other, a couple little habit changes. And, eventually you're at a point where this doesn't feel like we're depriving ourselves. And I'm sure you guys would agree. I know Alexi mentioned this before about, kind of like the utility of each additional purchase. Like, I don't feel that I'm depriving myself. I feel like I have everything I could ever need. I don't understand how everybody else spends so much money. I don't know.
Right.
I literally don't know the math of it. Like
Exactly.
It seems crazy to me, but very clearly, the three of us and everyone listening, we are a minority. And that's what's so cool about, your site and Mr. Money Mustache and Jim Collins is, you feel these are kindred spirits. That's the cool thing about this online community that we're part of. And, it's hard to find people in real life, quote unquote, that are like this. And, because we don't go around broadcasting it, maybe that's part of it. But
yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's even more amazing when you get to meet up in person, like Brad. So obviously you and I have hung out quite a bit. Alexi, I haven't met you in person yet, but hopefully next year in San Diego at one of the conferences, potentially.
Definitely.
And yeah, like meeting up with Mr. Money Mustache and Jim, and just hanging out with the 1500s and that we've been lucky enough to do. It's just an amazing experience. And I just recently got back from Ecuador, which was like a lot of readers were down there, and it was just an amazing week of just chatting with people that get this stuff. And I want to figure out how to do more of that, because it's, internet is great and it helps reach a lot of people, but it's really the in-person chatting and bouncing ideas off of people that's really, really valuable. And I don't know a good way to foster more of that. So if any listeners out there have any ideas, just send me an email. But yeah, no, it's kindred spirits is a great way to put it. So yeah, we're definitely going to start chatting more about travel hacking, but there's a few other financial things I wanted to chat with you guys about. Alexi, Sacred Cows is a post of yours that I think is maybe one of my favorites, if not the favorite, which I will link to in the show notes. But I've read a lot of things about peer-to-peer lending over the years, and hopefully I'm not putting it on the spot, because this was probably quite an old post of yours.
No, I remember the post. It's about Lending Club, right?
You're right, exactly. Yeah. And it's literally the only P2P lending post that I actually really agreed with. So would you mind just talking a little bit about that? And apologies if it's out of your mind and I didn't prep you for it, but I think it's worth talking about.
Yeah, that I carry my opinions about peer-to-peer lending to this day. So I don't think much has changed since I wrote the post. But I think the background of that post is kind of about. I think the interesting part about it is actually there's two aspects. One is peer-to-peer lending a good investment strategy? And that's an interesting question and tough to answer. And then the second question is, how do we make our decisions? And I think from our conversation just now, obviously we're incredibly influenced by those around us. So Brandon, when you write a post about the triple value of happiness, I might be messing up the title there a little bit, which I thought was an amazing post. That crystallizes something in my mind. Or when Mr. Money Mustache writes the surprisingly simple math post, it crystallizes something, and we get this power from other people's thinking. But I think that the flip side of that is that we get in these communities, and it becomes the case that because someone who you respect greatly about one thing has an opinion about it, it becomes incredibly influential. And so in this case, what I was writing about was peer-to-peer lending, and it's something that Pete has advocated for and had very good luck with. And I was kind of writing about, well, is it really a wise thing to look into? And the spoiler is that I think it's probably not a very good way of lending, of investing your money. And the reasons for that, the first one is that there's just no track record. So a lot of its appeal is kind of based on this, it's this new culture of lending money to someone else, and it's this different mode, and you're getting into this market that was previously not available to you, which is this peer-to-peer lending, and it's the social networks, and isn't that great? So that's some of the appeal. But when you're investing your money, I think your real question should be is, will I get a better return here than I will anywhere else? And so the way that I found it most useful to look at peer-to-peer loans was as a kind of junkier form of junk bonds. So junk bonds are just high yield bonds. So it's debt for corporations that have poor credit ratings. So maybe they're carrying a lot of debt already. There's a risk of bankruptcy. So you get a higher interest rate for lending to these bad companies than you would for lending to a well-capitalized company. And so I thought it would be useful to look at what are the positive sides and the negative sides of looking at buying junk bonds or junk bond funds. And so the positive is obviously that you get a higher dividend, so you're getting more money. You're getting more money in the form of a coupon for the amount that you lend. But the negative is that you're taking on more risk, and so you can't think of it as I'm buying a treasury and I'm getting more interest rate for it. What you're buying is a risky asset. So you're basically replacing stocks with a form of bond. And so you're getting all the risk of stocks with a limited upside, because the most you can get is the interest rate that they're offering you. And then, I think where that kind of fell apart is that, when you're lending to a corporation, they have assets. So you're actually lending against collateral. So if they go bankrupt, the first people who get paid back are the lenders, and then the shareholders get paid back. And they have things like trucks and buildings and infrastructure. Whereas if you're just lending to some guy who wants to get money to pay off his credit cards, that's a non-collateralized loan. And if they decide not to pay it, you really have no recourse to get money from them. So it's even more risky. So it's a junkier junk bond.
Right. Yeah. No,
and then
it's an amazing post. Oh, sorry. Continue, please.
And the final thing is, because of its risk, when you're buying into an asset like that, you're basically not getting any diversification. If you buy a low yielding treasury, you're getting something that's going to often move in the opposite direction of the market when the market goes down. When you buy this, it's going to go south at the exact same time stocks go south. And then the kicker is the most important thing in selecting an investment, really regardless of what it is the cost to invest. When I look at investment options, I'm always looking at the expense ratio first, because really nothing else is guaranteed. And they're charging something like 1% off the top. Would you ever buy a mutual fund with a 1% expense ratio? I sure wouldn't.
Right.
So it ended up being all of these reasons why I think it's a terrible idea. They're not liquid. You can't, if you want to get out of them at a time where you need money for something else, they're very difficult to sell in the secondary market. And so it was about why I don't think it's a good investment option. And then it was also about kind of the groupthink. And you can't, just because someone who you respect, and I deeply respect Pete at Mr. Money Mustache, is doing something, that doesn't mean it's a good idea for you to do something. We all make mistakes. We're all human, and you've kind of got to rely on your own analysis for every time, especially when you're investing. It's such the margins are so thin with investing that you've got to make smart decisions. And if you choose to do anything other than invest in low-cost indexing approach, well, you better have a pretty good reason to do it, and you better have thought it through for yourself.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you very much for going into that. Yeah. I encourage everyone out there to go ahead and read it, and there'll be a link in the show notes. But I couldn't agree more with everything you've said, and yeah, the post is very well written, and it's really interesting when you compare them to junky or junk bonds, and just how that puts it into a completely different perspective, which is necessary, because that's exactly what they are. So since we talked a little bit about investing philosophy and things like that, I don't know if you guys would mind maybe just covering like an overview of what you guys do. Are you guys index investors, or what do you mainly invest in? Brad, if you want to kick us off.
Sure. Yeah, I think Alexi just touched on it, which is low cost, and obviously you talk about that all the time, Brandon. It's after reading Jim Collins' stock series, and I'm sure you'll link to that if you haven't many times already.
I will link to that, because we mentioned it in Mr. 1500's post, and Jim emailed me. He's like, "Hey, where's my link? You guys talked about it.
Where's the link?"
So Jim, I won't make that mistake again. I will be linking to it in the post.
Yeah, that was a real eye opener for me. And this really being part of this online community has been just such an educational experience for me. Frankly, it's I've always felt that I've known my stuff on some level, but you learn something new every day by reading people's sites that you respect, and that made me realize just how essential it was to stick to low cost index funds. I think I read The Little Book of Common Sense Investing by Jack Bogle of Vanguard fame. And that's a pretty good, that's definitely a good read. I'd highly recommend grabbing that from your local library. Just kind of drills home the point even further. So yeah, I mean, essentially, all of our money is in Vanguard, ultra low cost index funds. I think mostly VTSAX and I don't remember the other symbols offhand, but yeah, essentially everything is there. I will sheepishly admit that I have some money in Lending Club. I got caught up in after hearing Alexi rail in it. I'm sitting here saying, oh man, I don't know if I should mention this or not. But
don't get me wrong, it's a great investment, Pat. I don't know how you could have possibly gotten the idea that I'm not a fan of Lending Club from what I just said.
No. It's funny. I think your larger point about having really thought it through. I can't say that I've sat here and spent any significant amount of time, but to me it's just kind of it's a fun investment, and
right.
Maybe
I think everybody has room in their portfolio, at least a little bit of a percentage to either pick stocks, even though we know we shouldn't, or pick some other fun investments to do. So you don't have to feel too bad.
And that definitely is a great point, Brandon. Which is this is not 50% of my portfolio. That would be insane. It's a tiny little percentage, and it's fun. I like logging into Lending Club every once a week for 30 seconds and picking out some more loans, and I've done reasonably well with it so far. But to Alexi's larger point, who knows what'll happen at the next recession or some such. It's definitely not. It's unclear because there's no track record. So. That's a tiny little fun percentage. So, that's kind of the overview.
Nice. How about you, Alexi?
So, I guess the way I invest would be one of those do as I say, not as I do sort of a things. I'm a little hesitant to share it, but I will share it. So, traditionally, I've always been just a low-cost, diversified index fund investor. And, a little bit more complex than just like target date funds. So, I am a believer in the value premium and the size premium. So I'm really a big believer in international diversification just as a way of de-risking your portfolio. I think we all have a tendency to way overweight the stocks for whatever country we happen to have been born in. And, U.S. has been a great stock market to date, but that doesn't mean it'll be the best stock market in the future. So I kind of believe in weighting stocks towards the actual world economy, so about 50% U.S. and a 50% international, and then overweighting value and small. So putting a little portion of your portfolio into small value funds in order to get those premiums, which are either risk premiums or not, but over the long course of time have been proven to increase returns and risk-adjusted return. So that's traditionally what I've done. For my taxable holdings, I put them all into Betterment, which I think is a fantastic place, particularly for taxable funds, because the tax loss harvesting feature is just huge. I'm at a pretty high marginal tax rate, so I make much more money from tax loss harvesting than I spend in the expense ratio, which is 0.15% for amounts over $100,000. So that's and then I find it to be behaviorally I never have to rebalance, so I'm never tempted to change my portfolio. I just literally put money in there, and they do everything for me, and I think it's worth the expense that they charge. Personally,
I completely agree. Yeah, I read a whole article about the fact that the tax loss harvesting alone could blow that 15 basis points fee out of the water. So I completely agree.
Last year wasn't particularly volatile, and I think the amount that I ended up harvesting was a little bit less than $2,000. So you figure 50% marginal tax rate if you include state taxes, well, that's like an extra $1,000 there. That's an awful lot of. It takes a lot of money for a 15 basis point expense ratio to get to that much money. So I'm compounding more money than I would without them. Now, whether that'll be the case 15 years from now, it's easily verifiable every year. I can always move it out if I'm not happy with the service, but to date, I've been very pleased with that. And then, the big change in my portfolio was about 14 or 15 months ago. I changed to more of an active approach using low-cost index funds called dual momentum.
Yeah,
And this is
you wrote some
something
post on that too. I can link to.
I've written a lot of posts on. I'm actually working on one which looks back at the past year, the performance of it relative to both the S&P 500 and to what my portfolio was before I switched over. So readers can look forward to that in the coming days. But essentially, I think that if I had to distill down the two things that I believe most about investing, number one is that you've got to keep it cheap. And number two is that you have to preserve your capital. And so my goal has really always been to diminish drawdowns more than to increase returns on any given year. And so what dual momentum is, it essentially uses two forms of momentum. One of them is called relative momentum, which looks at the relative performance of one asset class relative to another and puts all of your money in that asset class. So foreign equities versus US equities, or gold versus long treasuries, or whatever you choose to do. And it takes advantage of the momentum anomaly, which is that things that have recently done well over the course of 3 to 12 months will tend to do well over the short term, which is the next month or so. And so it's a very low frequency trading strategy where you trade maybe once or twice a year and change your position. But the part of it that appeals to me most is the so-called absolute momentum aspect of it, which basically says that there are periods in the market where risk is higher than other times. And if you just exit the market during those times and forego some of the upside during those times, you can avoid the massive drawdowns that can really eat away at returns. So you can avoid 2008, 2001, the big recession in the 70s, 89. You can really mitigate those losses. So it's a form of trend following. So people might be familiar with, getting out of the market when the 200-day moving average, when the price of the stock drops below the 200-day moving average. It's similar to that. So it's a fusion of those two strategies. But in the past, say 40, 50 years, what that's done is it's markedly reduced drawdowns and increased compounding returns. Now, whether that'll be the case in the future, I don't know. I'm pretty confident it'll decrease the big drawdowns. But for me, it just fits behaviorally. But it's not something that I really recommend to others unless they've done their own due diligence and kind of seen what it's like to have negative tracking error, which you'll have with any active strategy.
Sure. All right. I look forward to your post on how it's been going over the past little while. But I will also link to all of the other posts that you've written on it, so people can check that out. And yeah, hopefully, I imagine by the time I publish this, you'll have published the post that you just mentioned. So I'll put that in the show notes as well.
It'll be up in a couple days. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I'm definitely not that quick. So yeah, I'll put that in the show notes as well. All right. So yeah, I could talk about this stuff all day with you guys. And we're already quite a way in, and we haven't even started talking about travel hacking, with one of my favorite hobbies as well. So Brad, maybe tell us a little bit about, how Travel Miles 101 came about and the service that you guys offer.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. We started Travel Miles 101 earlier this year. So it was, I guess, January 2015. Alexi and I have been friends for a couple of years now and, share a mutual love of travel hacking. And, we just kind of talked about creating some type of step-by-step course that could help regular people get started with travel hacking, because it is difficult. Like we talked about before, there's a lot of information. I mean, there are great blogs out there that provide you everything you could possibly need, but the issue is they don't curate it. It's just this massive dump of information, 10 articles per site per day, and people get overwhelmed. And I'm frankly lucky that I didn't give up at the beginning, because I did see the value in it down the road. But there were times where I said, can I really do this? There's so many details, so many little things to worry about. And once you get into it and once you have a grasp on it, it does become a lot simpler. And Alexi, I'm sure, will talk about the intellectual aspect of it and how much he enjoys that side, and I do as well. It's a fun game, but that's once you're down the road a little bit. And we realized that, people need a little bit of help getting started. So, we joined together. We advertise this course that we created, and it was actually originally Miles for Mustachians. That's how we started
Nice.
it. We we're both, as you can tell from the conversation, both huge fans of Pete's and are active on the forum. And we just wanted to make we realized that people in the financial independence, early retirement, and Mr. Money Mustache group were especially suited for travel hacking. It's not for everybody, obviously. It's this is credit card related, so I mean that throws out 80 to 90% of people in the country who carry debt month to month. I mean, clearly this is not for those people, and we try to stress that at the beginning. But for people who pay their credit cards on time and in full every month, travel hacking is just an amazing way to really jump those rewards that you get back, which, for most cards, it's about 1%, and most people are happy with that, right? They get a check at the end of every month, at the end of every year for $200 or something, and, they're thrilled. But if you can take that normal spending and just be a little bit smarter about it and open up very targeted cards, you can earn $5,000 to $10,000 in free travel every year. And I know Alexi will tell you how he makes that look like chump change. I mean, which is kind of a cool aspect of the Travel Miles 101 course, is that Alexi and I do come at this from dramatically different perspectives. It's, maybe not different perspectives. We both see eye to eye on it, but he, as
different
also,
degrees of fanaticism, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's a perfect way of describing it. As you can tell from the conversation, I crave simplicity. Like, to me, I just kind of want to do my thing, and Alexi has this intellectual desire to maximize everything, right? If I could speak for you, it's a cool thing. I'm envious, believe me. I wish that was me, but what's neat about our perspective is, we show that pretty much anyone can succeed at travel hacking, whether you want to, go the Alexi method, as we call it, or the Brad method, or so I think that adds a lot of value. So yeah, I mean, really, it's a course that we've created, and people sign up for. They get emails every day, and we have a social media aspect to it too. We have a community forum and a private Facebook group, and it really engages, and people are able to ask questions in kind of like a safe place. It's a happy little corner of the travel hacking world, and
which is hard to come by if you've ever dove into like Flyer Talk or Mile Point or any of these places. There's not too many friendly, smiling faces helping you.
And that's
get off
that's
the
why
ground.
I brought it up exactly. It's like people get yelled at. Right? You go to Flyer Talk, you ask some noob question, and people get mad at you. And to me, that's ridiculous. Like, this is a hobby where we get to travel the world for pennies. And I mean, to me, that's something to, get on the rooftops and scream about, and enjoy. It's a wonderful thing. But people look at it like, oh, this is my hobby, I don't want you involved. And to me, that kind of exclusivity in any aspect of life just doesn't work. I recoil in horror from that. So, we wanted to create something that, people could get started with. And, listen, people are going to move on eventually, right? They're going to move on to travel is free, which, Brandon, you and I have talked about Drew's site. It's probably the most advanced and, the best travel hacking site there is. But, people need a place to start. And, that's what we think Travel Miles 101 has done. And, we expect to grow with them as well. We start from simple topics to, significantly more advanced stuff. So I think it definitely caters to everybody, but, originally, certainly it was for the beginner looking to make it work for his or her life.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. And what you said about how you can take it to many different levels, you don't have to do the advanced stuff to really benefit a ton from it. Like, you completely change the way you travel, and even if you can't take a lot of trips, it completely changes the way at least for me, it's reduced mostly all of the stress of travel. And I'm not flying business class and first class all the time or anything like that. It's just having a lot of different options when the cash price is too high to have 5 different options to use miles for the same thing, and it's just amazing. Like, I was I was flying to Miami, and I called the airport because I was late, and I was, I'm not going to get in until midnight. Are you going to be able to pick me up? And they said no. And even though I booked with miles that were non-refundable, I just called Hyatt, and they refunded my miles, no problem, actually, even though it wasn't legitimately allowed. And then I looked at all my other miles, and I booked a free hotel, with a different type of point. And I did all this from my phone. I didn't have to use any cash or spend a fortune on last minute, hotel rooms or anything. And it just made everything so much easier. So I think I think it's great what you guys are doing.
And one little tip, actually.
Go ahead, Brad.
I was going to say one little tip for Hyatt, actually. Their Twitter account is fantastic. It's Hyatt Concierge, and they answer essentially any question you have in like minutes. Wow. We had recently, my wife and I were going to go on a anniversary trip, and my daughter unfortunately got sick that morning, so we couldn't leave. And, we were supposed to check in probably 7 hours from then, and we should not have been able to get our points back. I just sent a real quick direct message to Hyatt Concierge, and boom, the points were back in my account within 2 minutes. It was amazing.
That's great.
Nice. Yeah, that's a little insider tip is the airlines and hotels definitely have very robust Twitter customer service. They're fantastic. So keep that in mind.
Nice tip. Yeah, great. I don't know why. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Alexi, you were going to say something.
Oh, no, I was just going to echo what you said, Brandon, which is about options. I think that's, optionality is the ultimate form of freedom. So if you have the ability to do multiple different things depending on what the environment throws at you, then the environment stops becoming so scary. So, and I think that you're absolutely right that having all of these different miles, it doesn't mean that you're going to go on 15 vacations a year. It means that when someone gets sick in your family, and a perfect example is that unfortunately my wife's father became very ill this last summer, and we were planning on going there in the middle of the summer as a family, but he became pretty ill, and so literally on a Saturday, after my wife got the call, I had her booked on a business class ticket to Japan the next day. She went there for a week, came back a week later. A couple of weeks later, we went as a family, and then, unfortunately, he ended up dying several weeks later. But again, just last minute on the plane. Maybe they weren't the best redemptions, but it was like zero stress because it was all points, and I'll always have enough points because of this hobby. So just there's always going to be stress in your life, but taking away these friction points, which frequently has to do with money, is incredibly liberating, and it gives you just amazing optionality.
And yeah, that's an excellent point. And yeah, it's just it's really, it still blows my mind what you can get by just focusing on this just a tiny bit. Like, I've probably been to almost 50 countries at this point. And yet I still, my savings rate is still very high, and it's not like I make a ton of money. It's only because, the miles let us travel as much as we want without really even like making a dent in our budget. And it just blows my mind every day that, the things that we're able to do. Like I was saying to you guys before the call, after we finish this call, I'm calling American and rebooking a trip from Japan to Jordan, in which we're going to be stopping, I think 6 or 7 times along the way for 24-hour layovers and these
awesome,
cool cities that we want to go to. The whole thing's going to be in business class because it's only an extra 7,500 miles compared to the economy price. So for 30,000 American miles, we're going to have this week-long vacation within a vacation, because when you're flying business class, it doesn't feel like travel. It's actually like an amazing experience that, you're getting free food, you're getting free drinks every time you get on a plane. So it's going to be like a week of free food, a week of free booze. We're going to see 6 or 7 cities for 24 hours. And obviously we pick the cities either we've been to before or only think we'd want to stay 24 hours in. And it's all for 30,000 miles plus, I think like $90 I think I paid in taxes or something. And it's just insane.
That's going to be awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that's truly an amazing redemption, and that's the mad scientist version. But the cool thing about this, and that's, believe me, I can't wait to see your post on that. People are going to be just blown away.
Yeah.
The neat thing about travel hacking, we talk about options, is people. There are different ways to succeed with this, and I think that's really important. Is that people listening to this might say, I have a family, I have 2 kids. I can't fly business class, from Jordan to, wherever. But, I want to go to the Caribbean or something, or I want to go to Disney World or Hawaii even. That's the aspiration. There are always ways to save. There are ways to do this without worrying. I think people hear frequent flyer miles and they say, oh, it's going to be impossible to redeem these things. There are blackout dates, all the usual reflexive horror stories, right? That people have heard of. I think we in the course, and certainly a lot of the information online, show that many of those are just simply not true. There are many, many ways to redeem miles, and certainly flexibility is essential. Sometimes even plus or minus 1 day, will make the difference between finding the award availability and not.
And that's why it's so great for the financially independent early retiree crowd, because it's like, well, we have the flexibility. We don't like spending money, and we like to optimize things. So it's like the perfect hobby for like us.
Yeah,
and
it's so
people
true.
Like us.
So true. And then, for people who can't do that, there are, hotel rewards are simple. Pretty much every hotel is not at full occupancy, almost any single night of the year, and you can use your points then. This is a generalization, obviously, but you look for like the low-hanging fruit. So, okay, I don't want to be bothered with frequent flyer mile seats because they're too difficult. Somebody hypothetically says that. Well, Southwest is simple to fly across the country. That's the biggest airline in America now. There are no award limitations on Southwest. So, there are no change fees. I mean, it's the easiest airline to use possible. So, that works for families. Hotel rewards work for families because they are so easy to book. Then, you see everybody's seen the Capital One venture commercials, I'm sure, with Jennifer Garner and whoever. Those, while they aren't the amazing redemptions like yours, Brandon, or, Alexi's to Japan in business class, like they still work for some people. It's going to save them $500 on their next trip, and it requires no thought. And, I'm just trying to paint the picture of this really does work for everybody. It works no matter how much or how little flexibility, whether you're employed full time or you're financially independent. This is really a marvelous hobby, and it does work for everybody.
Completely agree. And so your course is completely free at travelmiles101.com.
Correct.
Yep. Okay, so to sign up, just head there. I'll put a link in, and yeah, you can if you are new to the hobby, then this is a perfect way to start. And even if you're advanced travel hacker, you're definitely going to learn some stuff. So I will put a link in the show notes to that as well. Was there anything else you guys wanted to touch on with travel hacking?
Well, I think one thing that I would just say, that to kind of echo what you guys are saying, is that it's a perfect hobby both for people who are working towards early retirement and people who are already early retired for the reasons you've already stated. But the interesting thing about it is that, the value is very flat across different income levels, which is not always the case. So usually if you're very wealthy and you get an asset, it's worth less to you than someone who's not very wealthy and gets the same asset. But just in terms of the amount of value you get, it actually ends up being fairly flat. And the reason I'd say that is, if, let's say, you're making $30,000 a year and you add travel hacking to your list of skills, it essentially allows you to have like a $10,000 a year budget on travel for free. So, and maybe you're spending $100, $200 to hit all of your rewards, but you're getting a $10,000 a year. So you're getting a 25% boost in your pre-tax earnings, basically. Because you're making $30,000, you're actually bringing home much less than that. You're probably bringing home like $20,000. So you're getting a 50% increase in your after-tax amount of money or of capital available for you to use, as long as you use some of it for traveling. And then conversely, if you're at the extreme end of the high end of the income spectrum, and you're making that same $10,000, well, that $10,000 is not as much as of a percentage of your wealth. But if you're getting taxed at a high rate, there's really no taxation on points. They're seen as a refund, a partial refund for a purchase. So if you're getting $10,000 of purchasing power, that's the equivalent of making $20,000 extra that year. So each dollar that you get is actually worth twice as much. Each dollar that you spend is worth twice as much as it would otherwise be. So if you already spend $10,000 a year on travel and you spend it, instead of using money, you use miles, you're essentially giving yourself another $20,000 a year of income to invest towards your retirement. So it kind of works on both ends, with the tax efficiency for the wealthy and with the amount of value you get nominally for the people who aren't as wealthy. So it's an amazing thing.
Oh, that's a great point. That's something I never actually thought about. But yeah, that's an amazing way to put it. And yeah, you guys are helping people get even more value out of these points, which is a great thing, because yeah, I think a lot of people get points and then use them unwisely, and they're still valuable, obviously, for the reasons you mentioned. But yeah, if you can actually extract all the value that's possible out of them, and it's just an amazing hobby that helps you do a lot of really fun things that you wouldn't want to cut out of your life, and yet you're still able to save a ton of money and hit FI even sooner. So yeah, any other last minute travel hacking tips or discussions before we start wrapping up?
I don't think so.
Head over to Travel Miles 101?
Yeah, I think we cover most of the high points in the course. I really do.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll put a link there. And yeah, so when I usually end every episode with just asking my guest if what advice they would give to somebody maybe either starting on the path to financial independence or maybe further along the path. Brad, do you have anything that you would say?
I would say, yeah, that's a great question, Brandon. I would say keep at it, because it is it's such a fantastic journey. To me, it's psychological, and I think we've talked about this before. It's about reclaiming the power in your life, and whether you decide to keep working like Alexi's doing, or whether you stop and travel the world or do whatever it is, you can reclaim the power in your life. And so not only is it exciting on the front end, knowing, along the way, it's a journey, but then once you reach that destination, then you have an unlimited number of choices. So it might be outside the norm, for your family, and people might look at you differently, or your friends or some such, but know that, there's a community of people online here at Mad Fientists and other places. And, these are the kindred spirits that we were talking about before. And, we're all here to support you. And I think it's really a wonderful goal.
How about you, Alexi?
Yeah, I think my advice would be to kind of jump in with both feet and don't hesitate. And this is not just about financial independence, but really about anything. I think about, last winter when Brad and I were kind of talking about this course, and finally we just kind of said, look, we need a deadline. When are we going to get the first thing out? And we said, okay, well, why don't we say February 1st? And, we basically put together the whole curriculum in a month and a half. We wrote all these articles and adapted them and created this whole infrastructure. And both of us had full-time jobs at that point. And, it's just something that we did in our free time, and we got so much value out of it. Brad's taught me so much about, redemptions and about entrepreneurship, and about kind of online web businesses. And I've just gotten so much value out of this exercise that was kind of a diversion, and we've done, better than I thought we would. And so even if you think you're really, really busy, I'm a proceduralist who does heart procedures all day, and I had time to do all this stuff. So it's a value added thing to just kind of jump in with both feet and do a little bit of what seems like work, because it ends up being some of the most meaningful stuff you're going to do.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And yeah, if I can just jump in?
Yeah, absolutely, please.
Yeah, it's a funny story actually how we started the course, which was, we literally advertised this thing before it existed, excuse me. And
Nice.
It was amazing. We said to ourselves, we are going to do this and we can provide value to people, and let's do it. It's a sink or swim moment, and we were pretty sure that we were going to swim, obviously, and we made sure of it. And we produced a pretty solid piece of output, certainly, that we've had 2,000 people go through this course already. So it's
the great testimonials you guys have had, from happy customers and. Yeah, no, you guys have definitely
it's amazing.
Put something
to hear.
together.
You get an email saying, "Hey, we just took our family to Amsterdam and Florence and Paris, and we could have never done it without you." And it's just amazing. I can't tell you how satisfying that is. And this was something that we just did as a fun side project. And I think to Alexi's point is, you can always do more than you think you can. And something that might seem insurmountable, we've had lots of challenges just because, we're an accountant and a doctor trying to make a web course,
Right.
And we don't have any idea what we're doing, but, you learn something new every day, even if it's outside your comfort zone. And I think that is so important for life. And, forget online business or whatever you want to call this, it's just so important to learn new things, to stretch yourself, to set goals. These are crucial things, and it makes you just grow as a human being.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, go ahead, Alexi.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that Brad in my next course is probably going to be teaching everyone about the inefficiencies of the web-based business model, because it's really a hilarious sort of a thing. It's such an inefficient economy. You'd think it would be super efficient, but it's not. But we're still making it work, and it's been a ton of fun.
Nice. Well, is Travel Miles 101 the best place to find you guys, or is that if they want to get in touch? If people want to get in touch, you can find an email address there, or just join the Facebook group. Or
so either of our web pages both have a banner to take you to the Travel Miles 101, or you can just go directly to the website where you just enroll. And in the near future, we're going to be changing it to a twice a month course as opposed to a once a month course. So
cool.
You won't have to wait more than 15 days to get started.
Perfect.
So just sign up, join us in the community. We'd love to have everybody, like you said, Brandon, whether you're just starting out or you're an advanced travel hacker. We're really trying to create a nice community here, and we'd love to have anyone interested.
Nice. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been amazing. Sorry we went a little over time, but there was just every time we started talking about something, I would think of something else I wanted to chat with you guys about. So I really appreciate the time, and thanks a lot, guys.
I had a blast. Thank you, Brandon.
Thanks a lot, Brandon.
All right, take care. Bye.
Finance.